In this video, we will introduce you to the concept of personality disorders and focus on antisocial personality disorder and psychopathic traits.
Before we get into specific models, we need to start with a fundamental question. What is a personality disorder? A personality disorder reflects a persistent pattern of fundamental disturbances in self and interpersonal relations that affect everyday functioning across several life domains. General features might include problematic self-states, poor self-reflection, identity disturbance, and impaired empathic ability. In the diagnostic manuals in psychiatry, personality disorders are defined as categorical diagnoses that an individual either has or does not have. Some examples of personality disorders that are well researched include antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder.
During recent years, there has been an increasing criticism towards these categorical diagnoses. One major point concerns the heterogeneity of categorical diagnosis. Given that each diagnosis is composed of multiple traits, two individuals with the same diagnosis might present with different constellations of personality traits and behaviors. And this could be problematic when designing diagnosis-specific treatments. Other points of concern include extensive co-occurrence between personality disorders, which can be difficult to handle when recommending treatments, and arbitrary diagnostic thresholds, because an individual just below the threshold might have very severe problems, yet be denied treatment. Another clinical problem is that it is relatively common that patients are classified as personality disorder not otherwise specified.
In light of such concerns, and to move the field forward, there is an increasing emphasis on dimensional personality models. The overall idea is then to decompose complex personality disorders into their constituent parts, to get a better understanding of the underlying components. Such constituents might be dysregulated anger, anxiousness, or manipulativeness. Separate components could also be important to target and treat separately.
The DSM-5 includes two sections for assessing personality pathology. The categorical diagnoses are retained in Section 2. Section 3, Emerging Measures and Models, includes a novel hybrid model. In this model, personality pathology is assessed partly based on dimensional personality traits. As we mentioned in the previous video, this dimensional model is conceptually associated with the Big Five model, with an emphasis on maladaptive traits. It encompasses 5 broad domains of personality that we can see in this image, subsuming 25 facets.
In this picture, we can see an example of how a descriptive plot based on these 25 facets could look like for 2 fictitious patients. Proponents for this dimensional personality model argue that it has several clinical advantages. It could provide a richer description of an individual and be used to assess individuals that are sub-threshold, not qualifying for diagnosis, or individuals that are placed in the not otherwise specified categories.
In this video, we will say a few words specifically about antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. As this figure depicts, among adult males with criminal behavior, a smaller subset meet criteria for antisocial personality disorder. Among these males, an even smaller subgroup meet criteria for high psychopathic traits. Antisocial personality disorder reflects chronic patterns of law-breaking behaviors, violations of the rights of others, impulsivity, recklessness, and deceitfulness. In terms of the 5-factor model, it encompasses traits such as deceitfulness, hostility, risk-taking, irresponsibility, low conscientiousness, and high extraversion. Psychopathy reflects distinct emotional and interpersonal features. In 5-factor model terms, it refers to an individual that tends to have low anxiety, depressiveness, and vulnerability in combination with high impulsivity and high excitement seeking.
The exact definition of psychopathy remains debated. However, the most recent theoretical model in the field is the triarchic model of psychopathy. In this model, psychopathy is a constellation of traits from three partly distinct phenotypic constructs. Disinhibition, which reflects impaired impulse control and affect regulation. Boldness, which reflects social dominance, stress immunity, and venturesomeness. And meanness, which reflects callousness, cruelty, and exploitative behaviors. The triarchic model is developed based on past decades of research on neurobiological correlates of psychopathic traits. The theory is that different brain-based systems are associated with the development of different constellations of psychopathic traits. Specifically, the threat reactivity system, manifested as low fear, proposed to underpin boldness and meanness, and frontal-based systems proposed to underpin disinhibition.
In line with the findings for adults, among youth with deviant behaviors, a smaller subsample qualify for the diagnosis conduct disorder. In this group, an even smaller subgroup of youth have high callous unemotional, so-called CU traits. CU traits reflects lack of empathy and guilt and lack of concern for how our own behavior affect others. Children and youth with high CU traits seem to represent a distinct subgroup with certain cognitive and emotional difficulties, including fearlessness, impaired processing of punishment cues, and an impaired understanding of fear and distress in other people. An important challenge in the research field of psychopathy is therefore to gain an improved understanding of how psychopathic traits develop and manifest across extended time periods, given that high CU traits and psychopathic traits in youth can develop in several different directions based on a host of interacting factors, also including the development of the brain.
So, in summary, there is increased research into different constellations of personality traits as a means of better understanding complex personality disorders. Given that a dimensional model in the DSM-5 system is relatively new, more research is needed on various aspects of this model, including how well it predicts clinical outcomes. It is reasonable to assume that this model will influence future revisions of our diagnostic systems, like the DSM and the ICD systems.